Well, for more on Beijing's contribution to the fight against Ebola, we're joined by Kathryn Jacobsen, and she specializes in epidemiology at George Mason University. Welcome back to the broadcast. Always great to see you.
Thank you.
Tell us, why is China and why has China been focused so much on helping control disease in Africa?
Well, China has some special expertise in disease control that stems back to the SARS outbreak in 2003. That event really hit China hard, and so China learned how to do contact tracing, how to do quarantine and isolation of people who are infected. And so that's something that we've seen with flu outbreaks since then, that China really has expertise that nobody else has. And they've been able to bring that into West Africa. China was the first country to send medical personnel after the Ebola outbreak started, and they've continued to be present on the ground, playing a really important role.
They're also trying to help the people there understand what it means to have a public health emergency. Although they've obviously had plenty to learn from, but tell us how they're trying to educate the people there and what systems are usually in place in situations like this.
What we want to do is get ahead of the next outbreak. We were caught off guard by Ebola showing up in West Africa. We need to get some systems in place where there's routine surveillance going on of pathogens, so that we've got a laboratory network with hospitals across the region that are sending samples of fevers in, so they'll take blood samples and other tests and see what might be emerging. We want to catch the next outbreak early before it becomes this widespread event like we saw with Ebola.
Yeah, we're talking about this new Ebola vaccine that's currently being tested, but it's important not to let your guard down even at a time like this.
Right, we're down. There were only 2 new cases of Ebola last week. Unfortunately, both of those cases had a lot of contacts with people before they were diagnosed. So it's likely that we'll see more than 2 cases of Ebola diagnosed in the coming week. Until there's no Ebola anywhere, it could at any time resurge in the West African region. So there needs to be constant vigilance with that as we prepare for a mass vaccination campaign.
How would you compare the Ebola one to the malaria one that we've been talking about?
Malaria has been endemic, which means that it's always present for a large part of the world. And so it's something that to some extent people say, this is normal. The way some people would say, oh, we get colds every year. In other parts of the world, especially in the tropics, people get malaria every year. So it's not seen as the same kind of urgency, because in some places it's considered routine. The malaria vaccine is a really complex thing because it's a complex parasite, and it'll make a huge, huge difference for global health when we have a malaria vaccine. In the meanwhile, though, that we've been able to so quickly get this Ebola vaccine developed and tested, that really speaks well to how we'll be able to handle whatever outbreak may occur next anywhere in the world.
How would you compare the education aspect of this, Kathryn, to the health part of it? I mean, letting people know about what's going on and treating them at the same time.
One of the big challenges in West Africa is that the whole school system shut down for almost a year because of Ebola. And so some of the opportunities that would have been present to educate students who could take that information home to their families was lost because everything was just so overwhelmed by Ebola. So we have an opportunity now moving forward, now that there is this new awareness of infection control, to continue to emphasize that.
Okay, and you think Mr. Wang Yi's visit is really shining light on all of this and bringing it to the forefront?
I do. It's, first of all, just great to see that we've got international trade and travel happening back in the areas that were so affected by Ebola. So that's an encouraging sign. It's also really great that we're seeing China extending this commitment to, they've been with West Africa since the beginning helping to fight Ebola. They're going to continue to be a partner in the response through the recovery and the vaccination campaign. So that's wonderful news.
Kathryn Jacobsen, it's always a great pleasure to have you on. Thank you.
Thank you.
We appreciate it.